Welcome to the Martial Arts Lifestyle Podcast, where we talk with martial arts practitioners about their histories and the influence that their practice of martial arts has on their lives. You are listening to the free version of this podcast, which is abbreviated. Help support this program by considering to subscribe to us on Patreon, where you will get 4 full-length podcasts each month, 1 week before the YouTube release date. The cost is that of about 1 coffee shop coffee per month. Go to www.patreon.com/malmag to subscribe. That is www.patreon.com/malmag. If you would like to purchase single full-length episodes of the Martial Arts Lifestyle Podcast, visit our Gumroad page at malmag.gumroad.com, and that is malmag.gumroad.com. This week I get on Zoom and I talk with nearby Orange County again with Josh Gold, the editor of Aikido Journal. We talk about his beginnings in the martial arts as well as his current cross-training and the outstanding program for young people that he has. Sit back and enjoy. Welcome, everybody, to the Martial Arts Lifestyle Podcast. And in this episode, I've got a very interesting gentleman that I met through what I call the Mecca of Talent, or the Inosanto Academy, which not only brings in some very talented students, but it brings other people who come in and not only train, but they also sort of bring their art in. And this gentleman was kind of part of a crew that came in and was teaching Aikido to Guru Inosanto. And so I got to know him through that. And he's a very interesting guy who not only practices his art at a high level, but he's into pushing that art out, not only through his own journal, but through social impact projects as well. So this is going to be a fantastic conversation. This is Josh Gold. Welcome to the show, Josh.
Hey, Tim. Thanks for having me on.
Excellent. So you are an Aikido practitioner, and I think I've spoken to one person before on this show. I'm kind of mining most of the Inosanto family that I know, so it's kind of been mostly within those martial arts, but one of the ladies that trains at the academy started in Aikido, but I think you're the first kind of like really full on Aikido person I've spoken to. So I'm really kind of looking forward to that. So how did you get involved in martial arts?
It's not the most inspiring story, I suppose. I was 19 years old and just got out of high school, and I was basically a slacker. And so somebody in my family said, "You're such a slacker. You never do anything physical. So we're going to get you golf lessons so you can, kind of get off your ass and start doing stuff." And I was so opposed to golf lessons. I know it's a great sport, but it was just not for me, especially at the age of 19. So I said, you know what? I'll find something else to do. My plan was to find a martial art, do it for a few months until everything settled down, family's off my back, and then I would just quit and go back to playing D&D. And but anyway, so I found an Aikido dojo close to where I lived, which was in West Hollywood area at the time. And I started practicing Aikido, and I just kind of fell in love with it. And here I am 30-something years later, still practicing.
I like that. So it's either a slacker D&D guy or an Aikido guy. I like it. It's kind of funny. I mean, when people look at you, again, this is, we're on audio here, but you're not what I would call someone who looks like their couch potato. You're a guy who's actually in really good physical shape by your appearance.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's partly due to genetics. And then, of course, having a martial arts lifestyle helps quite a bit. And I also do a little bit of indoor rock climbing or yoga or things like that for cross-training purposes. So I think all that helps. And, I try to eat well, but I don't know. So it's some combination of all those things. But I think it's important to stay fit. And I can still be a D&D or video game nerd and all that stuff and still be in pretty decent shape.
Now, it's interesting. I find that I like D&D. I'm a sci-fi nut. I'm all these things too. And it's interesting how those of us who do get out of the basement, off the couch, and then, out into doing something, martial arts seems to be a popular avenue, I think, for that. And just curious, what was it about Aikido then that kind of took you from this sort of more mind activities like D&D into something that's, I mean, Aikido is pretty physical. I mean, you're taking some good falls and learning probably, I think, some of the most essential skills for self-defense, which is how to fall and how to roll. And then, I mean, you guys toss each other around and lock each other up. I mean, it looks quite painful.
It can be, and yes, you definitely learn how to fall. I don't know. I think I was about I was probably around 100 pounds or something when I started Aikido, so I was very very thin, and I think the fact that it's a non-competitive martial art was something that allowed me to get into to have like a smooth on ramp, if you will, and I also was not that excited about like getting punched in the face, right? So I the idea of putting on sparring gear and doing something like boxing or full contact karate for me at the time that I don't think that would have been something that would have engaged me as much. So I think it's there were certain elements of the art that made it easier for me to get started, I suppose.
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, you're still hitting the ground. That's pretty, that's a lot of contact, but it is definitely different than getting punched in the face for sure. Um, it's an interesting thing because Aikido is kind of one of those interesting arts when it comes to social media. I mean, there's a lot of people doing it. I mean, it's a quite popular martial art, and certainly got more so, I guess, during the late '80s and the early '90s when Steven Seagal started his films, and it became, I think, something that was more lucrative. I remember at the time that I started JKD in Cali, which was '94. I had relocated. I'd started in karate and kickboxing at the time. I had relocated, couldn't find the same thing I was doing, so I started looking around, and there was an Aikido place I think around, and it was something I considered it, but I think it was hours and access wasn't working out for me, and I ended up finding a JKD Kali guy, and that's the direction I went, which was pretty cool. Um, how do has you did you get into it like during that popularity period, or was it before?
It was probably during that spike. So I think it was sort of in the midst of the early Steven Seagal films. I think maybe two or three of them had come out or something like that when I had started, I believe. But yeah, Aikido, it at least in the United States, it grew in popularity quite a bit, I think, through the 1960s and 70s, kind of primarily Bay Area. There's a lot of stuff there, kind of the human potential movement and all this stuff. I think it made Aikido something that really fit with that, with that vibe. And so it grew quite a bit then. And then certainly in the 80s and early 90s, the Steven Seagal films really blew up the popularity, and then it grew quite a bit then as well. But it growth, I think, had stagnated by maybe 2000, 2005, something like that. And then since then, it's, the new people coming into the art has not been as much as it used to be.
Yeah, that was kind of my next question, was kind of about how you think that sort of the MMA and this quote unquote reality based stuff has kind of affected that.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's had a significant effect on it in some important ways. One is that when you have any kind of a large entertainment sport that has such huge media coverage, it's going to draw a lot of enthusiasm and interest and stuff like that. So then all the martial arts stuff that clusters around that, in that ecosystem, it's going to draw a lot of people, and it has drawn people away from a lot of the more traditional arts, not just Aikido, but whatever, kung fu, so on, kendo, whatever. So there is that dynamic, right? And then also there's a dynamic where I think that I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent, but a lot
Please
of
do. It's
these.
your show. You can go on whatever tangents you want.
All right. So anyway, there's these Budo arts that were developed, that kind of Aikido spawned out of, these Budo arts. These were things that were developed hundreds of years ago in a period of authoritarian peacetime in Japan, and they were never meant to be battlefield arts, actually, right? So the kind of things that you'd use to train warriors, which is very simple movements, like, okay, on one you lift the shield, on two, whatever, you drop the shield and thrust with the spear, stuff like that. They wanted things that were simple, that could be used in formation. And most of the people in the battlefield that died, in Japan at that time, they were not being killed in sword duels, right? So these Budo arts essentially were developed and grew almost as like officer training schools. So they taught leadership and adaptability and helped to create social mobility for people. So there was one aspect of it where you could have merchants come in and start interacting with the samurai and all that stuff, and they could be leveling up together and all these things. And arts like Aikido kind of grew out of these Budo arts. And so I think that one of the primary purpose of these art forms is personal development. So it's about personal development, personal growth, building those kinds of skills and attributes, having the support of community and things like that. It was not how to, the top priority was not how to prevail in a violent encounter with another human being, right? And so I think, though, what happened is that also this mystique tends to build up around these traditional arts. And so before the internet, at least the public internet and such, you would have these things where in the, whatever, it could be in the 70s or the 80s or something like that, people could tell these fantastic stories and like, oh yeah, Aikido is this amazing, it's this amazing thing, and you can just, defeat anybody with it, right? With this very simple, elegant movement or something like that, and they'll go flying through the air or whatever, right? And so I think that what happened is that mystique kind of built up, and this is, in a way, I think the fault of the Aikido community itself, right? Is that it propagates this kind of stuff, and then as MMA and the internet comes out and stuff like that, you can actually test this stuff, and it becomes very clear that it's not optimized for that purpose, right? So Aikido, it's not optimized for that, and so, which is fine, right? Lots of martial arts are not optimized for that. They focus on developing other things, building other qualities, right? You have different goals, different objectives, different martial arts. But where the problem occurs is when, for example, I'll just talk about Aikido because I'm from the Aikido community or world. I've seen some Aikido people where they'll insist that, oh no, this art is a battlefield art, and the only reason that you wouldn't use this stuff in an MMA ring is it's like too deadly or whatever, right? And then, right, and then it's very easy to just get an iPhone and film a match of somebody trying to use it exclusively in one of those, in that context, and it's clear that it doesn't work, and so then it sort of can discredit the art a little bit, right? So I think that's been an issue too, right? That's affected the Aikido community, but it's a beautiful art, and a lot of the techniques you see them in lots of different arts. So we do this like udegarami, like this, and in judo you'd call it udegarami, in Brazilian jiu-jitsu you call it an Americana. I've seen stuff like this. I've seen Guro Dan do these kinds of bent arm locks, or kotegaeshi, this wrist lock that we use. You see this all over the place. I've seen this in Kali disarms and things like that. Right. So I think that the Aikido, it's a beautiful system. It uses a lot of the same techniques that you would see in other systems as well, but the expression of those is different. It has a different purpose, and the training method is a little bit different as well. And it's a fantastic martial art for many people, and even for somebody who's a very proficient martial artist in whatever. It could be wrestling, it could be Muay Thai or something like that. I think Aikido can provide a lot of benefits in terms of understanding how to yield when you need to yield, how to blend or flow, certainly how to fall, gracefully and come back up, things like that. So anyway, that's my 2 cents on.
Oh, that's great. That's really interesting because I mean, I was a person who would have believed that it was a battlefield art, and the way I looked at it, it's like, well, you're encumbered in all this armor, so those movements to me make a lot of sense if you're wearing a lot of stuff. I thought, take a couple guys in Chicago in parkas fighting in the snow, and you might, have an advantage with that type of art.
Right. And so, like, Aikido, it's derived from Daito Ryu Aiki Jujitsu. And so, anyway, I think the idea is that some of these techniques were designed if the opponent has a weapon like a dagger or something, maybe they're armored or whatever. So there are factors that play like that because these, even though these were not battlefield arts, a lot of the kenjutsu, the sword fighting systems, there would be duels and things like this, so, and certainly competition. So they would put them, put them to the test. But for the most part, these arts are, they're not optimized for battlefield. They're not optimized to most effectively deal with a one-on-one violent encounter, right?
Right.
Certainly, if you train it, there will be benefits that will arise, in those situations. But it's not optimized specifically for that. It's like, you can have a Ferrari, which is optimized to drive on a racetrack under certain conditions,
Right.
but it's not going to do very well if you take it off road, right?
Exactly. That's where my Bronco will win the battle.
Exactly. So anyway, I think a lot of it is just understanding what's the purpose of each art, how is it expressed, and what do you want to get out of your martial arts training.
Right. Yeah, that's key. Now, do you have a school or do you teach at someone else's school?
I do have a school. So I started training at Tenshin Dojo in Los Angeles under Haro Matsuoka Sensei, and Matsuoka Sensei, he was actually Steven Seagal's like top student. He was the one who took the high falls in
Right.
Above the Law and all that stuff, right? So anyway, he parted ways with Steven Seagal at the I think around 1997 ish,
Mhm.
1998, something like that, and then he moved back to Japan.
Oh, wow.
Um, yeah, and started to train with a Aikido master there. And so then after that, maybe a year or two after that, I had moved from LA down to Laguna Beach area. And then my teacher, Matsuoka Sensei, he called me up and he's like, "Hey, I'm thinking about moving back to America." I'm like, "Great." And he said, "Oh, and I want to move near Irvine because I want my kids to go to school. I've researched the schools or whatever." So
Wow.
that
Fates
was
are
very,
in your
yeah,
favor there.
exactly. And so I think he really didn't have an interest in running a school, running an academy or dojo or managing it or any of that stuff. So I basically offered to do that part. So and he could be the chief instructor essentially. So then he came back in I think 2001, something like that, and then in 2002 I built Ikazuchi Dojo, and we kind of co-founded it together essentially. And so I would run all the business operations and management stuff, and he would be the main teacher. And just a couple of years ago, then he sort of handed that role off to me. So now I'm the chief instructor. He still teaches here a couple of days a week and teaches up in LA. But yeah, so I do run a school down here in Orange County, California. It's been around for about 20 years.
Wow. Well, congratulations. That's great. I mean, that's a great feat to have a martial arts business, let alone any business for that long, and especially after the whole COVID thing took out a lot of businesses and stuff. So definitely want to, give my congratulations on having a school for that long. It's really great.
Thank you.
Um,
Yeah,
you're
it's
welcome.
not. I used to do a little bit of work in the tech and digital media sector, and I will definitely tell you that if your goal is to scale financially, like a martial arts based business is not your best choice. It's not your best choice. So it's definitely like a passion thing, and
Right.
yeah, yeah. But it takes a lot to do it right.
Right. Yeah, well, I said the same thing. I edited TV for 20 years and I'm scaling back on that, going into more teaching and kind of doing my thing with this. And yeah, the pay is much different. We could say that's for sure. But, I like to get up in the morning and do it. So it's a good thing.
Yeah, I love it too. Yeah.
So when you have students come to you, what are they looking for? Is it all over the board, or is it people primarily focused when they come and look for Aikido? They're kind of looking for something in particular.
That's a great question. What I find, it's kind of a mix. There's some percentage of folks who come in looking for self-defense. And we can talk about that, kind of we can bracket that off a little bit because I have a certain way of responding to that. So some people will be looking for self-defense. Some people are very attracted to the philosophy or the principles of Aikido, or maybe Japanese culture, and so they come in for that. Some people are very interested in martial arts and they just feel like Aikido is going to be a good fit for them. Maybe they're not so close with the kind of very close, intense physical contact you'd have in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, or maybe having sticks flying at them in Kali is initially like too much, or whatever. I don't know. Everybody's got different things, but there's a set of people who are just interested in martial arts of some kind, and then they kind of feel like Aikido would be the best fit. So it's like, I think it's sort of those three groups. You get the self-defense people, you get the people who have they've read something about the the art and the principles behind it, and they come in and they're intrigued by that. And then there's some people who are just like, hey, I just want to do a martial art of some kind, and this seems like a good place to do that.
Wow, that's good cross section. Yeah, it's interesting because I think, again, I don't know a lot of Aikido practitioners, but I know a few, and there seems to be a really interesting common thread to me, and this is very complimentary. You all seem very intellectual. You're all people that I really like to talk to. You're brainy people. You're people who have a lot of deep thoughts about things and are good at analysis, I think, and cause and effect and this sort of thing. I don't know if that's something you find yourself, but
do that
yeah.
Actually, I do. Yeah, I've actually a bunch of Aikido folks have commented on this, but a lot of intellectual folks are drawn to Aikido, and I'm not exactly sure why, but
Dang,
but
that was
they are.
question to you is why? Why is that?
I just don't know, but yeah, we have lots of like professors, research scientists.
And this concludes the abbreviated version of the Martial Arts Lifestyle Podcast. Please click the like and subscribe buttons as well as the notification bell. Also consider subscribing to the full-length podcast at www.patreon.com/malmag or purchasing individual full-length episodes at malmag.gumroad.com. Thank you for listening to this episode with Josh Gold. Coming up next week, martial artist and book author Randall Henry. Check out the Malmag store at www.martialartslifestylemagazine.com and click on the store tab. There, you will find a full selection of Timmy B's brand sticks for FMA and Krabi Krabong, as well as Timmy B's and Dos Manos t-shirts. Many more products coming soon. Also click on our courses tab to purchase online courses, right now featuring a course in the Dos Manos stick of FMA. More courses to come. This show is produced by Martial Arts Lifestyle Magazine. Visit us at www.martialartslifestylemagazine.com and enjoy the free version of our online magazine with articles, a recommended schools page, and a worldwide events calendar. Music by Jack Al Relic. Martial Arts Lifestyle Magazine and the Martial Arts Lifestyle Podcast are trademarked and copyrighted by TNT LLC.